Welcome to Season 2 of You and Me Kid, a podcast about starting and raising a family on your own, where I speak with other single moms, those still considering, and experts in relevant fields to give you a real sense of what the day-to-day experience of solo parenting looks and feels like. So wherever you are in the process, I hope this podcast provides some support, helpful info, and most importantly, humor. Thanks so much for listening. Now let's get to it. Cara, I'm so excited that we're talking again. I know we've been talking for months about doing this again. I want to just take a second to have you kind of introduce yourself again, even though you were on season 1, the very last episode of the first season. But just tell people a little bit about what you do, and then I'll give a little context on kind of how this conversation started to come together.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here, Sarah. You are a dear friend and colleague, and it's my pleasure to be here talking to you today. I'm Cara. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado, and I have 2 jobs. One, I work as a therapist in a private practice called Aspen Integrated Counseling, and I'm also a wellness educator. I have over 20 years of developing wellness education programs, and what I like to do with those programs is to distill complex clinical concepts and deliver them to you in actionable, relatable, and accessible frameworks for better living. So that's my job, and that's what I do. I'm also a mom. I have a 7-year-old and a new dog mom. I have a puppy now, and I live in Carbondale, Colorado.
4 jobs, at least 4 jobs, if not other ones we're not mentioning. Just to kind of give those listening a little bit of background on why I felt like this conversation was so important. You and I as friends, and also as you as a professional, I think talk about a lot of this casually, like when we catch up in our 5-10 minutes kind of here and there after drop off on the phone. And I talk about a lot of these topics with friends kind of over text, over phone, but I had a couple of folks listen to the podcast who know me and make a couple of comments like, gosh, you just balance it all so well, and you're always so positive. And, it just seems like you're crushing this single mom thing, is this phrase I get a lot. While I will take that as a compliment, and I'll try to soak that in a little bit, even though I don't feel that all the time, I appreciate those sentiments from people. And I really just realized really quickly when I got a couple of those comments in short sequence a couple of months ago that I wasn't doing a good enough job of talking about some of these darker, really real, challenging moments of parenting on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I just all of a sudden had this aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is a huge piece of my experience that I'm not sharing, and I didn't really intentionally keep it out. But we just didn't get there maybe in the talks in the first season. And I was not pregnant through the first quarter of season 1. I was pregnant through the rest of the season. So I hadn't had those experiences yet. I was just making assumptions about what it would be like. And so now I'm in it. I'm almost 2 years into this single mom thing. So I've got real life examples of what it feels like in those really challenging moments. And I can't think of anybody better to talk to about those moments, and also both as my friend and as a therapist, just talking me through kind of what that feels like, letting me share what those experiences are, and then also being your amazing self in terms of giving both me and those listening some tips on when those kind of things pop up and when those feelings pop up and how to navigate them.
What a privilege. I'm so genuinely excited to be here with you. And when you told me what you wanted to talk about today, I was delighted, because 2 things are true. There are many things that you're doing really well with, and that have been easier than you thought, and that you're really proud of yourself around, and that you've spent a lot of time and effort in your life to develop a lot of these strengths. And then the other thing that's true is that this is a really human thing that you're doing, being a parent, being a single parent. And there's going to be a lot of challenges and dark moments in that too. So I love you giving all of the listeners an opportunity to feel less alone, their own experiences of being human, and especially the harder, more clunky ones. Yeah. Do you want to tell me a little bit, as you were preparing for this conversation, what you wanted to share with the listeners about what's been hard for you recently?
Yeah, I was trying to kind of bucket them out a little bit for the things that continue to pop up as these common threads over the course of the past couple years. And then there's some specific moments that really stand out too. But I think the one that comes up the most that I'm very surprised about is the isolation of parenting. Prior to having a baby, I experienced that as well because I was the only one without a kid. So it was like I wasn't in the married club, I wasn't in the baby club. And so some of those friendships kind of started to distance a little bit, right? Because we weren't in the same stage of life. And I made this assumption that when I had a baby, we would all just like do all the things together. And I now know as a mom of a toddler, that was never going to happen. My friends' kids are older and they've established great communities of their own in elementary school and beyond. And so I think shifting from thinking I would just be a part of this like bigger club of people doing all these fun adventures and making plans together to, oh, I have to find my own new community.
Yeah.
And not feeling kind of heavy and feeling like it's Ellie and I alone a lot of the time and a lot more than I expected.
How old is Ellie right now?
She's almost 2. She'll be 2 in July. Yeah.
Speaking to that like isolation experience, just really stand up for all the toddler moms for a second right now. What is the hardest parts of the isolation with a 2-year-old specifically? Or what does that look like on a just daily basis?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm by nature, a pretty social person. And so seeing friends and having experiences and adventures is just something that was a huge part of my life prior to having a baby. And I thought would kind of very easily continue into this stage, which I now know is maybe a little bit naive. But it feels like a lot of things happening at other age groups, like tons of activities happening with friends who have elementary school kids, or they're in teams, or they're going to birthday parties, or they're planning weekend getaways with these great groups of families that they have found with their kids. And feeling like I don't have that group yet, and just kind of making plans it's just Ellie and I like every weekend and putting effort into trying to see people and trying to schedule, but it's hard to make plans with people, I think. And so just a lot more alone time than I realized.
Yeah. And do you feel like the hard to make plans with people, do you feel like that's more like you haven't found that community of people in the exact stage of life as a parent you're in? Because you don't know that before you become a parent. Specific stage of life things are like by kids' age, developmental place. So do you feel like it's that you haven't found the like 2-year-old parent posse, or do you feel like what a 2-year-old needs and the demands of being with a 2-year-old are really different than maybe what like a first grader would be doing? And so like you have to be home more, or like there's just less flexibility, or she might need more downtime or rest time, or the resources like energy or financial that it would take to go do the adventure are just much more significant than you anticipated before, or for a different reason. What do you think the challenge is?
All of the above. All of the above. I think I haven't found that community yet. I remember very specifically my close friends going through this experience and saying, I wish I had a crew. I'm feeling alone. I remember it. And as one of their kind of single without kid friends, I remember saying like, I'm right here. I can hang out with you anytime. And I now get that didn't make sense for what they were looking for. Yes, the 2-year-old stage is different. I have to plan around naps. Other people who have kids the same age might have a different nap schedule. And all of a sudden, we can meet up at a certain time. So it's that. And then there's this other single mom element in there too, Cara, that is maybe in my head, but sometimes it feels like partnered families go on adventures or events or make plans together. So like the wife and the wife are friends and the husband are friends. And so they all kind of come as a package deal. And again, it might be in my head, but it does sometimes feel like I'm left out of those things because I don't have the full family unit.
Yeah.
Well, all three.
Regardless of the reason why it's happening, whether it's in your head or not, what you're experiencing is real for you, right? You're feeling left out and not included in 2-year-old posse family adventures.
Yeah.
Right? Just a real experience you're having, regardless of why it's happening. Can you, if you feel comfortable sharing, can you tell me a little bit more about what you said earlier about like, I was feeling lonely before becoming a parent, and I kind of thought it would change when I became a parent. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think, a lot of us have experienced kind of that stage where that first set of friends start getting married, right? And it kind of feels like the distance between you gets a little bit bigger, and then they have one kid and the distance gets a little bit bigger, and then they have more kids. And it kind of feels like that separation started my friends started having kids 10 years ago. So that started so long ago that I was already kind of feeling they're just totally different lives. And I now know what that feels like, right? It wasn't anyone trying to hurt anyone or, any of that. It just is such a different experience being on the schedule of a child. And so there was already that distance. And I thought that after I had Ellie, that distance would close a little bit. And it hasn't, because now I realize those ages are so specific to activities. And my friends with multiple kids have double the schedules that they're navigating. So it's logistics and just life stages for sure that make it harder for us to overlap and spend time together.
And maybe throw in like the modern expectation. I think most people in modern life feel overscheduled, overworked, like lonelier than we ever have been. Like I have friends or I have people, but I never see them, or they don't make time for me, or I have trouble making time for them. Yeah, I think it's a really big challenge in modern life.
Yeah.
Feeling busy a lot. And then also kind of monotonous, like I'm just in the grind of my life and it's less fulfilling and it's lonelier than I want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. The monotony is definitely a factor. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think when it's just Ellie and me, that element of like, we get up, we have breakfast, we walk around the neighborhood, we go to school, I pick her up at the same time, we go to probably one of the same 3 playgrounds every day, we have dinner, we do tub, we go to bed. Like you get into this schedule, I think, and it is us, like 90% of the time, just us. And I've got amazing friends that will come over for dinner and tub time, and it like makes my entire week when they do. But it does feel like the same kind of schedule over and over, regardless of how much I try to like shake it up and go out to dinner or go to a new playground, as silly as that sounds. Like, so that's in there too. And I think the isolation for me and the monotony go together, because it feels like maybe if there was another family there, or we like always meet up with the same crew of people at the park in the afternoon or something like that, it would be less lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having adults to talk to.
Yeah. Well, that too.
Yeah. All day long, or for that 90% of the time.
Yeah. I joke every night we sit down to dinner together, and I'm always like, how was your day? And I kind of say it as a joke because she can't say anything back. But it is kind of funny. Like we're sitting down together, but there's no conversation.
There's no adult conversation.
Right.
And that gets to be a legitimately lonely experience for you.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be talking about it right now? What are you noticing?
It feels great. I've been thinking a lot about it lately because as I said, I remember so clearly when my mom friends brought it up to me, because I remember my reaction was like, wow, like I get that, but I also immediately felt like I could help that as someone who had an easy schedule and I didn't have kids. And it's like, let's just plan a trip. Like I'm here, I can do that whenever. But I now know, that just wasn't a fit for them. And they've all since then found these incredible communities of people. And for me, there's an element of it just hasn't happened yet. Like I keep thinking about the yet, and I know it will happen. And I'm excited about the idea of all these new people in my life, right? And who they are, and they have families, and what are we going to do? But it feels like maybe elementary school or preschool or whatever that age is that those communities start to form is a ways away.
Yeah.
And what do I do in the near term to just keep some fun and adventure and spontaneity happening when spontaneity is not really what happens with a toddler?
Sarah, what I really love about what you're saying is that like really hopeful statement of yet. It's like you can really see yourself in a transition period of time. And it is a two things are true time. It's a wonderful, beautiful time that you wouldn't trade for anything. And it's also a lonelier, more isolated and monotonous time, whether it's the age or whether it's the circumstance of not having a group of friends that in their similar ages and stages group. It is a period of time and it's a transition time but it's really hard. And I love the generosity in you that wants to be vulnerable and share that with other people so that maybe there's some things that we could talk about together today that can help humans when they find themselves in a transitional period of time that is meaningful and important, but is legitimately hard.
Yeah.
How to weather that in a way that you feel proud of, in a way that helps you to feel skillful and resilient through the challenges. And also that can find some ways to soothe whatever it is that's hurting. When we had talked last in our first podcast interview, you had thought that the hardest time was when Allie was a baby, right? Like you then was really worried about like, what is it going to be like to be single parenting if my baby can't tell me what's wrong or she's crying or up in the middle of the night? And how do I draw near to myself in those times? And so I want to say to anyone who's listening to this that didn't listen to that, if that is you and that is actually your experience or either what you're worried about or that's actually your experience, you're a single parent and you've got a little, you're navigating it alone, go listen to that beautiful conversation with Sarah. We talked a lot about that. But that was also a transitional period that we were talking about for you. And maybe you can verify this. I just know this because we're friends, but that actually wasn't hard for you. It was a transitional period of time, but it wasn't one that was hard. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? And then we'll talk about this transitional period that you weren't expecting, but it is real and it's here right now for you.
Yeah, it's so funny. I listened to that again probably 6 months ago, and I was just laughing like, oh my God, had I known, I would have had different questions. I did not have what I was told by the world, not even really close friends necessarily, but society kind of tells you those first months are going to be so hard and you're going to be up all night and you're going to be this like walking zombie in a bathrobe who hasn't showered in 7 days. And I think that gets compounded when you think about doing that on your own. I will say, just to reference that interview, there were some things that we talked about that I have used in those more recent nights that have happened later in my parenting that we talked about. And one of them that comes to mind really quickly is that you said in that interview, like, I think you said something in a much more beautiful way, but kind of controlling the environment of when those things were happening, whether it's a candle or it's soothing music or putting in your AirPods and listening to music if, you know, a baby's crying or something, and that the importance of kind of regulating yourself in that moment. And I have used that a lot. Mm-hmm. I've also had times where we're 3 hours into a rough night and I just take a minute and walk outside and get some fresh air for 1 minute and go back in, right? And you had mentioned both those things. So I want to say thank you for those tips. But yes, to your point, the more challenging moments of parenting have happened in the past year, not the first year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'd be really fun to jump into some of those frameworks for just how to get through a season of life that is just spicier than you would like it to be, right? Like either spicier than you expected or spicier than is within your previous window of tolerance or capability, the one thing I know to be true about parenting, it's true in my journey so far, is that our children help us to do more than we ever thought that we could and more than we were ever capable of doing before them. And so I feel like there's something in what's happening right now for you around this loneliness where it's happening for you rather than to you. So it is maybe expected, right? Like maybe many people are having a similar experience being in the doldrums of toddlerhood, where there's no wind, like nothing's happening. You're just hanging out and it's beautiful and nice and you've got a lot of good things, but nothing's happening and it can be really lonely and really, really isolating.
Yeah, no, I think it would be important just to give us some context because I know those moments come up in different places and different times for different people. For me, again, I really didn't. I mean, I'm sure we had a handful of nights where Ellie kind of cried that first year. They didn't make like a mark on me like the ones that have happened in the past year. A couple quick examples I would say that happened probably in the past 6 months. I had a night earlier this year, so about 3 months ago, where I had maybe torn something in my knee that day skiing with friends. I had one of those like 5-star, glorious, wonderful days that all of a sudden just shifted. And I pulled something in my knee. I went home. My child then screamed the next 3 nights. We weren't in our own home. And there were elements that really kind of triggered me. One was all she wanted to do was be held, but I couldn't really hold her safely with my knee injury, but I was doing it anyway. So she's screaming all night. The knee kept giving out. So at one point I was crying, she was crying, and I had no idea what was going on with her. Also, there were other people in the house that I knew I was keeping up, which for me is like a really big, like even in my own house, I share a wall. So when Ellie cries in my own house, I'm only just thinking about the neighbors and then I'm waking them up. So that was just one big ball of like, I was one of the only times where she was crying and I was crying at the same time. And it felt really hard for a while, being injured and having a baby. Yeah.
If we could just pause there for that you that went through that in the recent past, that's a really hard moment to want to attend to your child, want to help her, not know what's exactly going on and what's going to help. But really that like kind of lonely and isolated feeling of I actually have some significant needs and limitations as a human and I can't get my own needs met in this moment. And me not being able to get my needs met really sucks and really doesn't feel good and is really activating for me. But also that I can't get my needs met so that I can meet her needs so that my other need, which is to caretake other people and make sure they're not inconvenienced by me, that part of you was really not happy in that moment either.
And the irony of it is, and I think there's more to this, but the irony is one of my best friends was in the house with me. And I know that she was awake. I know she would have come in. I know now she was up all night thinking about what she could do to help me. But as we know as moms, it's like there really wasn't anything she could have done.
Yeah.
And it probably would have stressed me out a little bit if she'd come in, even though it would have been really loving and wonderful. Ellie needed me. I couldn't have passed her off at 2 a.m. I didn't know what was going on. Brainstorming about it at 2 a.m. with her wouldn't have been helpful. So it's almost one of those moments where it's like, it wasn't even that I'm a single parent. Even if I had had a husband, it would have been it's just stressful in its own.
It's stressful.
Because her kid needs just you and you don't have the solution. And so, yeah, it was tough all around, but no one really helped me out of that. It just was hard.
It was a lonely moment, even though it wasn't because there wasn't someone there who wouldn't have wanted to help or would have been there for you.
I had a house full of people that love both of us, and it just was a lonely moment. And I think that's such a good point.
Yeah. What are the frameworks that help people through these like spicy seasons? Like it's a stretch of time where there's more of those lonely or isolated moments, or what helps even just in one of those really lonely moments, whether it's because of the monotony of not having a crew or whether it's because you've been through an experience like you just described, I think the first thing that I find to be soothing and grounding is to name what's happening as something that is hard, that it's okay that it's happening, even though it's hard. I think my assumption is that people who choose to embark on single parenting are pretty high functioning individuals, that they have high standards for themselves in terms of their work. They have to be very self-sufficient. And when we as parents are in a clunky, awkward, we don't know what we're doing, we feel under-resourced and inadequate and under-supported, I think sometimes there's like a storyteller that says that this is bad and it shouldn't be bad. Or this is bad because I didn't do something right. Or this is bad because I should have done something to prevent this bad thing from happening. And so the first like framework and like tool that I would recommend is whenever we're in a spicy season or a spicy moment is to exercise the skill of self-compassion, which is actually a researched skill. And it has 3 ingredients to it. And the first ingredient is being willing to like kind of pause. I like to use like rafting analogies, like river analogies. Something that my family likes to do, and it makes sense in my mind. But when you're rafting, there's like a current and you're floating down the river, and the river has calm sections in it. And the river has like really technical sections where like it feels high consequence. And the river also has just like really bumpy, fun or not fun, just depends on you and your preferences, sections to it. And the thing about rivers is that process repeats itself over and over and over again. So there's calm, and then there's technical and consequential, and then there's kind of bumpy, either fun or bumpy, spicy. And it will happen over and over again. And so river guides know that when they can tell that either they've gotten into a section that's a little spicier, or they can see a section approaching, skilled guide will do something called eddying out. So they'll go to the side of the river into these pockets of water called eddies that are circulating and slow moving. There could be a fast stream of water, but there'll be these pockets of stillness on the sides. And so as human beings, we want to learn how to eddy out so that when we're either approaching or right in the middle of something that feels really hard to us, and that's going to be unique to our temperament, our personalities, our life circumstances, that's going to be unique to us as people, based off of like adversity we've experienced over time and how well we feel like we've grown past that adversity or not. That's what makes things spicy sometimes. And so the skill is to eddy out. And there might be many different things to do in this eddy to help you move through the challenge. So one of those things is self-compassion. So for high achievers, high drivers, high functioning, people who are well-meaning and big-hearted, who are taking on the single parenting job, it'd be really easy to meet a moment of pain with a strong critic or with a part of you that wants to minimize how hard it is and wants to beat you up for it being hard. And so the skill of self-compassion is number 1, 3 parts, being able to recognize a moment of pain and giving it dignity by just letting it be what it is, calling it, this is a moment of pain. This is hard for me right now, with no qualifications, no shoulds, no explanations of why, even just allowing it to be hard without needing to explain it away or explain its validity, you letting it be valid. The second skill in the bigger skill set of self-compassion is to move toward yourself with kindness as you would a dear friend. And so we hold ourselves usually to a much different standard than we would hold someone we deeply love and care about. We'd be much more willing to say, it makes sense that that would be hard. And I'm so sorry it's hard. And it's allowed to be hard. It's not hard because you're doing anything wrong. It's just, this is hard and it gets to be hard. And then the third skill with self-compassion is to invite a little bit of common humanity, is what they call it in the research, to the table, which is like, I'm allowed to struggle. Every human being struggles. To really see that in the ongoing flow of life, struggles are not optional. Struggles are inherent in the process. And what is more important with this common humanity is not to try to take away the pain of the moment, but to try to take away the alone. And this is actually the privilege of being a parent, is that you will learn that what your kid needs more than anything else is not for you to take away their challenges in life, but to take away their sense of being alone in the challenges. That is what research says is most important. And so the privilege of parenting, as you practice doing that for Ellie, is that you're going to be asked to parent yourself along the way, whether you're partnered or not. And so you need to take away the alone in your own pain as a growing, healing human. And you take away the alone, not with another person first, but you within you, the inner rich world within yourself. And so self-compassion is a way of taking away the alone. And so you accept this is a season of spiciness, or this is a specific stretch of spicy river. And I'm going to first just eddy out to set the tone of how I'm going to be there for myself. If you could take away the pain of a hurt knee immediately, you would. If you could take away the pain of not having a crew to like hang out with, you would. And so like well-meaning friends are like, well, why don't you just like call the other kids at daycare? Or why don't you just whatever? There's good reasons that we don't even need to talk about why that's not happening. Right. And so what they're trying to do is take away the pain for you. And your mind also will want to do that. Will want a high achieving, badass realtor, marketing, branding strategist will want to kind of workshop your way out of that painful moment. But really what you need is your most loving, nurturing you to first just acknowledge that it's a moment of pain and offer yourself some compassion. Allow it to be a hard moment and turn toward yourself in a compassionate way. What comes up for you when I share that framework?
I love it. I had a couple of just kind of aha moments when you were going through that. The first is, I love the river analogy. You use that in some of the frameworks that we've talked about in our friendship as well. And I think about it a lot. One of the things that stands out to me about that is when you said it just keeps continuing. And if there's one big aha I've had as a parent, it's that this is cyclical. Like this night will happen again. This sickness will happen again. I will be lonely again. I will also have a night where I have all the friends around me and feel super supported again, but it's all going to keep happening.
Yes.
And I do feel myself getting better at handling it the more it happens. I'm like, oh, we're going through a sleep regression. Like, I got this time, right? But those first times are hard. And even when they happen, and I know they're going to happen at 1 a.m., it's hard. And you made this other beautiful point that I think I'm going to think about a lot in those moments, which is it's not to take away the challenge, which is where my brain goes, as you totally called, which is like workshopping it of, okay, what is behind the screaming? Is it pain? Is it she's scared? Is like what's going on and how can I find the solution? Which of course we want to do as parents, and I will continue to do, but I think the more important moment is to think about just not having her feel alone and just riding it out together. Like,
yes,
it's whatever this is going to last. Or maybe I will find, maybe it's maybe you're teething and you do need Tylenol. I don't know, but we're going to ride this thing out together and we're in it together. And I love that. And I think that's such a beautiful place to take yourself back to when it's rough.
Well, I think that it makes sense as a first line that you would workshop it a bit. Like if there's something, to find out what's underneath the pain and there's something you can practically easily do to alleviate it, yes, you should do that.
Yeah.
But these like lonely, isolated, darker, monotonous moments, there's nothing maybe that it's a fallacy of the mind to think that this pain is happening because I haven't workshopped it
Yeah.
appropriately. Or if I can just workshop it appropriately, then I can prevent the cyclical nature of the flow of life from happening. And so you workshop it initially, but then you switch into when I can't take away the pain, like really simply and concretely, it's way more important and way more healing for everybody involved to take away the alone. And I would say that in addition to taking away the alone with her, it's taking away the alone within yourself. So that has to do with the weight, the story that you're telling yourself about yourself in that moment. And so self-compassion says this moment of pain doesn't have to mean that I'm a bad parent. This moment of pain doesn't have to mean that this stretch of the river is the only stretch that I'll ever have. This moment of pain doesn't have to mean that I am alone in this feeling of loneliness and isolation. I can see that this is a bigger human pain, and I can choose to move toward myself with a kind, warm, I guess, embrace within. So it is holding that space for her, but I'm really thinking about that parent care. It's being that parent to yourself on the inside when you're in pain. And so how do we take away the alone? We can take away the alone by validating this is a moment of pain. This is really hard. And I'm going to see that pain not as like a flaw or an inadequacy or something to just like sweep under the rug, but as an experience to be relationally met in a thoughtful, compassionate way. The other framework that I would want to offer people today is how important self-regulation is in these moments, whether they be longer stretches of time or like really acute, difficult night moments. So we want to, I guess the two frameworks I'm bringing to the table today are self-compassion and self-regulation. And so because something like loneliness and isolation and monotony, that is something that you're going to chip away at little by little, the best that you can every day. You're going to take meaningful steps as they come to mind and as situations evolve to keep trying to build your support network, keep trying to invite and pursue and initiate other connections, waiting out the developmental period that just is what it is and knowing you're going to get to a better stretch. You're going to do that. But this is a long-term game. So you're going to need the framework of self-compassion as your companion and also the framework of self-regulation. So what I mean by self-regulation is I'm talking about the brain-body connection. And when human beings go through difficult experiences, whatever they are, our autonomic nervous system activates as it should to protect us from pain and adversity. And so we have this beautiful inner system that without our consent, without our choice, decides how it's going to try to help us survive and keep us safe. And so it's going to put us into one of three different nervous system states, depending on what your brain and body think are going to keep you the safest. And so when it's adversity, like a really stressful work meeting, or when it's adversity, your kid just did not want to get dressed and like wouldn't get into the car seat and you had to like hold her down and she was screaming and it really sucked, or whatever it was, whatever that little or big adversity experience was, your mind will be trying to help you out with that. But what most people don't know is that your body is already responding to that as a threat. And it's putting you into a nervous system state that it thinks it's going to help you to get through that. And so
yes,
have a whole conversation about this, but this is going to be like the 3-minute version of this. Your nervous system has a state, and I'll use the anatomical scientific language, but I don't want people to get hung up on that. It's called your ventral vagal state, where that is where you can think about it. I like to give scientific names, like really easy to remember names. Let's call it your green zone, where your body says, even though there's maybe some adversity present, I feel like we're safe enough. There's enough signals of safety in the environment, and I feel resourced enough within that I can show up to that challenge as my most resource self. I'm calm, I'm creative, I feel confident in what's happening. I feel like I can problem solve this, I can strategize. I know this is hard, but I feel like I can get through it without too much alarm or fanfare. And I feel like I can be connected to myself, and I feel like I can be connected to others in this moment. So that's nervous system state number 1. Nervous system state number 2 is called your sympathetic nervous system state. We can rename it the red zone. And this is when your nervous system is bringing more sympathetic resourcing to the table. It feels like there's enough threats, less cues of safety, enough little threats, either inside of you or around you or in the circumstance, that it's not okay just to be in that green zone. We've got to ramp up, and we got to move more into our fight or flight place. And I think that's where like higher achievers go into like workshop mode when it's not actually helpful. Like there's a point where workshopping is helpful, and then where it's not actually helping. Like there's nothing to workshop. It's just a hard moment. But you can tell that you're kind of stuck in that red zone when you're continuing to, like, you're fighting the moment, you're trying to change it, nothing you're doing is working, and you're kind of making it worse. Like your distress is getting worse, your child's distress is maybe getting worse, and you're feeling like really pressured and bound in the situation. You feel like you just you want to leave it, you want to get away from it, or you want to manage it and you want to control it and you want to extinguish it. Everyone has a red zone. It's not a bad place to be. I talk more about these nervous system states in an online course that I have available. So I'll definitely share that information at the end of this conversation for people who are like, wait a second, I need to hear more about this. But in that red zone, the way that your brain is working, the way that you are moving through your emotions, the types of thoughts you have about yourself and the situation, your perceptions about what's happening, and the behaviors that you'll take will be really different when you're in the red zone versus being in the green zone. So the outside situation can be the exact same. But it's like putting on a pair of glasses. If I'm putting on the green zone glasses, just the way I see it, the way I'm thinking about it, the way I'm relating to the emotions, even the hard ones, looks really different with those green zone glasses on versus if I'm putting on that red zone glasses. It's going to really influence the way that I think and see and feel and behave in that moment. The third nervous system state is called your dorsal vagal state, and I rename that the blue zone. And the blue zone is another really good, really helpful protective nervous system state, just like the red zone. It's where your body is saying, okay, if fighting isn't getting us safe and fleeing isn't getting us safe, we're going to freeze / maybe collapse and shut down and withdraw and numb out and get distance. It's kind of like, and we can all relate to all 3 of these states. I might be in all 3 of these states on a daily basis. Like I wake up maybe in the green zone, and then some work got a little spicy and I got a little activated. And then maybe I don't know if I got back to a green zone or not. And I give up my all to my kid. And it's the end of the day. And I kind of thought I was going to journal and work on that like art project or connect with a friend. And now all I want to do is drink a glass of wine and like binge watch TV and stay up way too late. Like, what do they call that? Like revenge parenting, where like you have no time for yourself. And so you do like all these self-soothing kind of nummy checkout behaviors, but all these self-soothing behaviors late at night because you don't have time to do it any other time. So that's the blue zone. And of course, there are like extreme versions of these nervous system states. There are trauma-related experiences that have to do with these states. But what I'm really passionate about teaching this audience about self-regulation is just to get, I am a human being that has a brain-body connection that is deeply powerful and that overrides my conscious thought. And that if I'm in a dysregulated state, a red or blue zone state, I can't really trust my brain to tell me its best thoughts. I can't really trust my brain to help me move through these emotions as my best self. And the way that I'm seeing this and the way that I'm moving through this might be helped if I did a little bit of that. Maybe we can say the same framework that we were using earlier. If I do a little bit of parenting, if I eddy out and do a little bit of soothing and validating for myself, if I eddy out and practice some self-regulation skills, I'm going to do some self-compassion, and then I'm going to attend to my nervous system. I'm going to do some self-regulating practices that will then help me to get back to my most resource self so that I'm the like best guide I can be to get down that spicy part of the river. And what's beautiful about self-compassion, self-regulation is that it doesn't take away the stretch of the river that's ahead of you. It just makes you the most confident, creative, calm, and compassionate and connected you to get through that stretch of the river over to the other side to where the water is a little bit calmer.
What are a few of the self-regulation tactics that you use? What are your go-tos?
My go-tos, there are 3 go-tos, and they are something called non-sleep deep rest, which is a guided relaxation practice. This is something that I have a free audio for that I'm happy to gift to your audience if they're interested. It is not a meditation practice. It is a body-based, it's not a mind-based practice. It's a body-based practice that helps you in a very short period of time. Usually non-sleep deep rest practices are 20 minutes or less. Mine are 10 minutes because I am just too busy to do 20 minutes. So I do 10 minute. I like 10-minute or less things, but it is a guided relaxation practice that self-directs and trains your nervous system to move out of a dysregulated state into a regulated state. We probably don't have time to talk about that practice today, but if people are curious, they can go to luminarylifekits.com or they can email you and ask you to put them in contact with me, but www.luminarylifekits.com. You'll learn all about the Calm Kit, and I give lots of information about the nervous system and lots of guided practices that are 10 minutes or less that are really profound and clinically proven and science-backed to help with self-regulation. The second thing that people don't have to like opt into or sign up for that's really, really effective is something called sensory grounding. And so you actually did that in the story you shared earlier where you felt you could notice how dysregulated you were feeling and that your brain and body weren't helping the situation to get better and you weren't feeling as resources you'd like to ride out the hard situation. So you made sure Ellie was in a safe place and you took 60 seconds to step outside. And so what you were doing, whether you knew it or not, was sensory grounding. So it's where you orient yourself to the physical things in your environment that are soothing or calming or signal safety, beauty, well-being, sourcefulness to your nervous system. So sensory grounding. And then the third tool that I recommend is something called deliberate breathing. So there's a lot of information out there about breath practices and why they might be beneficial, but there are specific breathing practices that are a lot of efficacy to like put the brake on that like really dysregulated place that can bring us back like in a soothing and really sophisticated way back to a green zone. Deliberate breathing is the third thing. Do we have time for me to teach a quick deliberate breathing practice like to the crew?
Yeah. And can I ask one question before we do that? Sometimes in the moments where I'm with my daughter and she's crying and I'm upset and I'm kind of doing that, like taking care of myself first, trying to use some of these practices, I'm also thinking about the fact that, and I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm asking you, can she get to a calm state if I'm not in a calm state? Like, is me getting there first the first step to her being able to do that? Or how do we kind of tie together in those moments?
Gosh, Sarah, what a beautiful question. That would be so fun to have a full conversation.
Yeah.
There's a short and long answer to that. And the short answer is there's something called co-regulation that's built into the human nervous system, that when we're around other nervous systems, other human beings that are regulated and calm, we will likely move toward calm and regulation. And when we're around nervous systems that are dysregulated, it kind of is a signal of threat to our nervous system. So it can make it hard to stay calm and regulated around really dysregulated people. It's kind of like if we kind of had a hard day at work and we were just like, oh, like grumpy and hangry and like blah, and we were feeling really scratchy. And then we maybe have dinner. We luckily have dinner set aside with friends. We have a babysitter. We have dinner set aside with friends, and they're like calm and just like in a great mood and like loving and caring. And like over time, like probably not that much time, like just being around their energy, their vibe, their states, your state will start to calm and settle and kind of move back toward integration and resilience just by being there with other regulated states. So I said this is a short answer, and it is, even though it's taken me a long time to get there. The short answer is you being calm and regulated. But it's not that you need to be calm and regulated all the time. It's that you need to know when you're not, and then do the generous work of helping yourself move back to that regulated place. And so it's not about staying regulated all the time. It's about knowing your signs of dysregulation as an individual and getting some education and tools and skills on how to move yourself back into a regulated state. Your daughter will benefit significantly from that experience. The long answer is it could be fun to do a whole like child psychology conversation, and that it's very hard for kids to regulate without co-regulating. And the sad thing is that some kids learn how to self-regulate without a regulated parent. But that's not necessarily good for kids. It's not healthy for them. That's like maybe those of us who felt like we had to be like the parentified child learned how to like take care of ourselves because we felt like we needed to take care of our parents. Like our big feelings were too much for them, or we needed to stay regulated because they were dysregulated. You know, the long answer is kids are much healthier when they've got a parent who is not always regulated. That is not possible, and it's not the goal, but that is self-aware and practices self-compassion and self-regulation every day, multiple times a day, so that you can move back toward a regulated state more of the time and be that safe and soothing presence for our kids.
I feel that a lot when I am able to catch myself in those moments, and I do what is kind of for me, like it's almost like tricking myself. Like I'll talk slower, I'll be like softer in my tone, I'll like sing her a song or something, right? And it's for me, like I'm kind of trying to convince myself that I'm calm, but it works because then I'm calmer and then she's calmer and I'm taking bigger breaths. But it takes me a second to like click into what's happening and move to those tools. But I have seen it just really affect her visually. But it's, as you said, it's a practice. I have to do it every time. I'm not automatically going to be that person in those moments. It takes me a few steps to remind myself that, what's happening, and then kind of clue into what I need. And then she kind of gets the benefits of that too.
Absolutely. I love, to me, where we're like the note that I would love to end on in our conversation is, of course, as a mother or as a father, as a single parent, you're wanting to be that comforting, calming, soothing presence for your child. And how important it is to also be that presence for ourselves. And to talk about how hard it is to do that and to be trying to be that calm presence for ourselves and for our kids. That's a really hard thing. And it is the beauty of this stretch of the river that you're in, that your life will be better for practicing. Like you're probably getting a lot of reps right now, full reps in this season of your life. And we could be talking about someone who's in a young child, like baby phase where it's spicy, or maybe they can relate to the toddler phase it's spicy, or maybe they're at the phase that I'm at in my parenting where what's spicy is now my kid is getting his feelings hurt by his best friends and he's getting left out and he's, then he doesn't want to play with them. Like there's all this interpersonal spiciness that you're not experiencing at all right now. And it's the point that the river keeps continuing. But the beauty is being a parent is such a privilege. It is a catalyst and it ensures our ongoing growth as human beings and healing as human beings. Since we don't have time to the breathing practice together, I just want to let your audience know is that I have a ton of free teaching and content on YouTube. If you follow me at Luminary Life Kits, I try to give all the tools, all the frameworks, and their basics just away because I really want more people to have the understanding and the tools to help themselves. And if you want to do a geekier deep dive, I have online courses that teach all the breathing practices that I would love to offer your clients.
I love that. And I just want to highlight one thing really quickly. The luminary teachings that you've now been doing for many, many, many years, and I've said many times, are my operating system. That's the toolkit that I go to pull from in every single facet of my life. And Luminary Life Kits is just the most recent evolution of some of those teachings. And it's a new set of toolkits. And there's 2 out right now, right? Which ones are those?
So there's the Calm Kit, which we've been talking a lot or making a nod to Calm Kit this whole conversation. But it does teach kind of the most up-to-date, most grounded and actionable mental health framework for understanding the mind-body connection and learning what self-regulation is, why it's so important, and gives a generous audio library of practices so that you can, in 10 minutes or less, like put on your little Calm Kit tool and bind yourself back in your window of tolerance or back in your green zone. And then the second kit is called the Vitality Kit. And that is a kit that teaches about values-aligned living. And it helps you to understand from a mental health and perspective what values actually are and how to use values to increase your well-being, make decisions, and feel more richness and purpose and meaning in your day-to-day life. So I think both the Calm Kit and the Vitality Kit would be really helpful for those lonely, isolating, kind of monotonous moments that we experience as parents, and also would provide just more tools for the toolkit in those dark nights of parenting, or those like spicy stretches that we all go through, but I think especially single parents are likely to experience.
Well, I just downloaded both. I'm so thrilled to dive into them. I've had some late nights recently, so the timing couldn't be better for me to be getting some more Cara insights. But thank you so much. I could do 100 of these chats and record them. I'm already thinking about what we can talk about in our next discussion, but I love you. I'm so grateful for all of your warmth and insight and friendship. And so thanks for being on the podcast again.
You're so welcome. I love you too. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. If you made it to this point, what a generous audience you've all been. Thank you for sharing the space with us.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. For more information about the podcast or me, go to youandmekidpod.com. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you or your company are looking to jump into the podcast world, now is the time. The Plug Agency is here to connect you to the full power of podcasting. You just record and leave the rest to us. The people are listening and want to hear from you. theplug-agency.com. That's theplug-agency.com. Click the link in the episode description for an exclusive offer.